The Canadian Zags took down the Australian Gales. Rui got ejected in Japan's loss to France, and Filip Petrusev led Serbia in scoring in a blowout victory in Olympic updates for our Zags.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Happy August, and welcome into the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Folks, download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. We got an all-Olympic coverage episode today here of Locked On Zags as we get into the month of August. We're talking about how our alumni did the last couple of days at the Olympics. We'll go through box scores and talk about performances that we watched for each of the 7 Zags participating in the Olympics. We'll talk about the men's side in the first segment, the women's side in the second segment. We'll close out the show with updates on what is coming up next for all of the Zags, when their next games are, how likely they are to potentially get a medal before the Olympics are up. Continuing our Olympics coverage here on Locked On Zags as we get into what is going to be the off season for the podcast. Next couple of weeks, still going to be 5 episodes a week. For the last few weeks of August and throughout September, show is going to drop to about 3 episodes per week as we enter the slowest part of the off season on the basketball side of things. But the Olympic coverage is going to keep us rolling for the next couple of weeks. We start with the Canadians. We will talk about Team USA's win over South Sudan as well. But let's start with Team Canada. Took down Australia 93-83. This game ended up happening a couple of days ago. We haven't gotten to it here on Locked On Zags. It's effectively as close as you're going to get to Gonzaga versus St. Mary's at the Olympic stage. You have a pair of Zags representing Canada, of course, in Kelly Olynyk and Andrew Nembhard. You have a trio of Gales representing Australia and Jock Landale, Patty Mills, who are both playing big minutes, and Matthew Dellavedova, who is not playing big minutes, or in some cases at all. Connor Griffin is a former Zag who is an assistant coach on staff with the Team Canada team as well. So lots of Zags, lots of Gales, kind of a fun, exciting matchup here. Team Canada got the best of Australia, like we said, 93-83. Frankly, it wasn't really because of these Zags, though. They didn't, neither Nembhard or Kelly really did a lot in this game. We've seen them be better in previous games and exhibition games. This just wasn't a matchup that either of them really excelled in. Kelly, in fact, only played 5 minutes in this game, considering how big of a piece he has been as a kind of honorary captain for Team Canada, one of their few bigger players, one of the few post types that they have on this roster. A little surprising to see him not play very much, especially against a team where they kind of could have used his size. Jock Landale really did a lot of great stuff for Australia, but Kelly only played 5 minutes, picked up 2 fouls, did not have any other stats. He went 0 of 1 from the field. The foul trouble definitely limited his ability to be impactful in this game. Canada kind of wrote it out with Dwight Powell in the front court and a lot of like 3-4 guard lineups, and that seems to really work for them in this one. Andrew Nembhard played much more in this game. I think he played about 23 minutes in total compared to the 5 minutes for Kelly, but Nembhard didn't do a ton either. He had 5 points on 1 of 6 shooting. That includes 1 of 3 from beyond the arc, a pair of free throws as well. He did have 4 rebounds and an assist, along with a steal, a turnover, and a foul. So not a great performance from him either, but he's the 3rd, 4th-ish guard. He's behind Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Jamal Murray, a pair of Kentucky alums. He's behind Lou Dort. He's behind RJ Barrett, who's been looking fantastic. Barrett's a little bit more of a wing than a guard necessarily, but Andrew is a reserve guard for this team. He does play decent minutes, but he's not out there expected to be the team's leading scorer or anything like that. So I don't think it's a shock to see him. 5 points, 4 boards doesn't feel off. Obviously, you'd like to see him shoot better than 1 of 6 from the field. That's kind of where you want to see that improvement for him. But obviously, for Kelly, for Andrew, I guarantee you they're not concerned about their individual performance as much as they are concerned about bringing a medal home to Canada. And the biggest story, the most important thing is Canada's 2-0. they are in a position to put themselves in a spot where they can compete for a gold medal, or at the very least for a silver or a bronze medal. This USA roster looks fantastic through their first couple of games. A lot of consternation about their ability to take home the gold. They're off to a really good start and seem like they're still the heavy favorites to do so, but obviously Canada is in the mix, at least for one of those medals, and is off to a good start in that category as well. I mentioned Jock Landale, 16 points, 12 boards, 4 assists for him, 7 of 10 shooting. Just another masterful performance from him. He's really establishing how good of a player he is proving that his NBA success is not a fluke, and a guy who probably should have gotten more attention out of St. Mary's initially, but has had a really successful career and looked every bit the part in this game against Canada. Patty Mills had 8 points and a pair of steals and boards. He also had 1 assist, but he did have 4 turnovers and shot 2 of 10 from the field. Not his strongest game as a player who is one of the most prolific scorers in Olympic basketball history. Didn't really bring it in this contest. And then Matthew Dellavedova did not play. Coach's decision. Still stands out to me that he was picked for this roster over Matisse Thybulle in particular, who's on the Portland Trailblazers, who went to Washington, who feels like he would have been a better fit for this Australian roster, but who knows? Not a decision that I was in charge of by any stretch, but was a little bit odd to see Delly make the roster, especially if he's not going to play. Looking at the other men's basketball players, France defeated Japan 94-90 in overtime on Wednesday. A lot of you saw this game, or at least I saw a lot of conversation about this game on social media, and it was really unfortunate what happened. It feels a lot like the Japanese team kind of got robbed here from an opportunity to pull off what would have been a massive victory for them. Rui was excellent. 24 points, 3 rebounds, 10 of 16 shooting, 3 of 5 from beyond the arc. He was fantastic. And those numbers stand out in particular because he didn't get to play for a large chunk of the second half because he was ejected for a flagrant foul, his second flagrant foul in the game. And it was a bad call. I know FIBA rules are a little bit different, so I don't want to get all the way into the specifics there because they do officiate things differently, but it did not look like it merited a flagrant foul. He just had his hand lightly on, I believe it was on Wembanyama or it was Rudy Gobert. I actually can't remember which player, but they were going up for a lay-in and Rui had his arm on their arm and kind of pulled a little bit, which I know you're not supposed to do, but it was soft. It was a soft call to eject Japan's best player for that in a close game that they weren't expected to win. Like, context does matter. Situation matters here, and for Rui to not get a chance to finish that game because of that call was pretty atrocious. Beyond that, there was a phantom foul call on a 3-point attempt by France. They were down 4. They called a foul on the 3-point attempt that did not look to be a foul. Said player from France hit the 3, hit the free throw, tied the game, sent it into overtime, where France eventually won. Again, you can't put all of that on the officiating by any stretch, but it didn't look like a particularly great call. And had it not been made, it seems like the Japanese team would have had a better chance to pull off an upset here. Obviously, people were wondering about the officiating because it was the home country team in France that got the win here because of that. But it is what it is, and hopefully Rui and them can kind of rebound and find a way to win their next contest. Former Washington State star Josh Hawkinson also represents Japan, for those who didn't know. Hawkinson had a great game for the Japanese team, 16 points, 8 boards, 5 of 10 from the field, and Victor Wembanyama did the things that we know he's capable of doing for France, 18 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists in that overtime victory. Serbia defeated Puerto Rico 107-66, largest margin of victory for the team Serbia in the Olympic basketball history, and their leading scorer was not Nikola Jokic. It was not Bogdan Bogdanovic. It was Filip Petrusev. Now, he only had 15 points, which is not bad, but just highlighting that in a game where his team scored 107 points, he led the team with 15 points, which kind of clearly indicates that there was a lot of balanced scoring for that Serbian roster against Puerto Rico, who's considered one of the weaker teams in this 12-team field. Petrusev had 15 points and 9 rebounds. He also had a steal and 3 turnovers. He only played 16 minutes, and he was insanely efficient, 7 of 9 shooting. Again, he led the team. He did not have a particularly good game against the U.S., he only scored 2 points in that game, was struggled defensively to guard LeBron James and Kevin Durant, like, every human being on the planet who has attempted to guard those guys has struggled in that same capacity. But for Petrusev to bounce back from that game and have a 15-point, highly efficient 7 of 9 shooting to lead this team is a nice story for him. Nikola Jokic had 14 points, was one off of him. He also had 15 rebounds and 9 assists, very close to throwing together an Olympic triple-double for the Joker on that Serbian team. And then Team USA, coached by, of course, Mark Few as an assistant, took down South Sudan 103-86 was the final score there. We saw a little bit of the zone, and we kind of heard reports and saw some photos that Mark Few was kind of the person implementing the zone defense for this Team USA roster. So it's kind of fun to see a zone out there, which I'm not used to seeing Mark Few teams run a zone, but also seeing it and knowing, oh, Few's probably the person who put that in and is kind of, barking out the instructions on that, which is kind of a fun moment to get to see that opportunity. Great performances across the board for Team USA. Bam Adebayo off the bench, 18-7. Kevin Durant had 14, Anthony Edwards had 13, LeBron had 12. Very balanced scoring effort from Team USA in that win over a very fun and exciting South Sudanese roster that has been one of the best stories in the Olympics. It would have been tough for them to get a victory here, even though they played Team USA a lot closer in an exhibition game earlier in the month of July. But nice to see them coming out and playing a competitive game. They got this thing pretty close in the third quarter before Team USA managed to run away with it in the fourth. Well, folks, Team Canada, they're not doing as well on the women's side. They look like they're going to medal on the men's side, or at least they're putting themselves in a good position to do so. On the women's side, they are 0-2. We have not seen Yvonne Ejim on the floor yet. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk some 3-on-3 action, who looks like they might be taking home a gold from the Gonzaga alumni ranks. All that and more coming up in just a second. But first, I want to tell you all about today's sponsor, GameTime. It's the middle of minor league baseball season. The weather is hot, though it's starting to cool down in the evenings. It is the perfect time to be able to go hit up a ballpark and make a last-minute decision to drive out to the park. And that's what I love about GameTime, because prices on the GameTime app, they actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. So with their killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat feature, and their lowest price guarantee, GameTime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And if you're somebody who worries that your tickets are going to be bogus, that you're going to get turned away at the door from buying them from a third-party app, GameTime's ticketing coverage means your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the entire ticketing industry. Personally, I love having that peace of mind. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. You and a friend want to go to a minor league game for $30, $15 a ticket, you can get them for $10 if you use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. So download the GameTime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast. And folks, if you're enjoying Locked On Zags for your first listen of the day, make your second listen to the Locked On College Basketball podcast. Myself, my co-host Isaac Shade, also of Locked On Tar Heels, guest Leaf Tulane, who many of you just heard on Wednesday's edition of Locked On Zags. We're out there. We're talking college hoops all the time right now. Isaac and I are in the middle of a series talking about the best transfer portal classes in every conference, in every high major conference. Next week, we will do some mid-major stuff as well, so you will get to hear our thoughts on Gonzaga's transfer portal class on next Monday's episode of Locked On College Basketball. Wherever you find Locked On Zags, you can find Locked On College Basketball. Go check it out. It is fantastic, and it is well worth the listen. All right, we talked men's Olympic basketball 5-on-5 in the first segment. We talked about what happened with Kelly Olynyk and Andrew Nembhard when they took on Australia. We talked about Filip Petrusev's big game against Puerto Rico. We talked about Rui's big game and unfortunate ejection in the Japan loss to France. Now I want to talk about what's going on for our Gonzaga alumni on the women's side. And I already teased kind of the biggest portion, the biggest storyline on the women's side for Gonzaga right now, which is that Yvonne Ejim is not getting onto the floor for Team Canada. This is not a surprise. It's also not really indicative of her struggling or her overall talent level, anything like that. It's hard to be a current college student and get significant minutes at the Olympic level, even though Team Canada is struggling. Team Canada isn't struggling in part because of their guard play. Their front court is pretty darn good. So for Yvonne to not be seeing the floor with the talent that is in front of her on that roster, mostly current WNBA players, is understandable. Of course, we'd like to see her play. Who wouldn't? Coach Lisa Fortier is in the house. She's there. You've seen pictures if you follow her on Instagram or on social media. She's there. She's watching. She's also checking out Sonny Greinacher and Kacie Bosch. We'll get to them in a second, a pair of other former Zag alumni. But for Yvonne, you can tell that she is a light on that team. She's got an energy to her. Every time Team Canada posts pictures on Instagram or on Twitter or wherever, she's always in the pictures. They always have a photo of her on the bench cheering along. Like, you can just tell that she has a very big presence on the roster despite not getting playing time in the actual Olympic Games. Hopefully that'll change. Ideally, it'll change in a situation where Team Canada is in a blowout and they're winning, and she can come in and play some minutes at the end just to be able to say she played some Olympic basketball. I don't think this is going to be Yvonne's last Olympics representing Team Canada. In fact, she's on the roster in part because they have her identified as somebody that they believe will be a future piece for Team Canada's Olympic hopes in future seasons. So they're planning for her to be around for a while, but it'd still be nice to get it out on the floor this year. So hopefully she'll get those opportunities. Canada lost their first game to France, 75-54. They lost their second game to Australia. As I'm recording this on Thursday morning, the game just finished up a few hours ago. It's probably the reason we pushed the show a little bit. Yvonne did not play in that one either. They lost to Australia 70-65 in that one. But want to talk about those other Zags as well, and we'll also talk a bit about the Team USA women's team as well. First of all, let's start with the German team for the women's basketball 3-on-3 tournament. Sunny Greinacher, who started at Gonzaga from, I think, 2010 to 2014, in that range, right around when I was in college. She was a fantastic player at Gonzaga, all WCC contributor, post players like 6'2", 6'3", really, really deft scorer around the rim. I remember how talented she was at Gonzaga, and she's been with German's 3-on-3 team for a while. And it shows. She's looked excellent so far in the first few games for Germany. They beat USA 17-13. They also beat Canada 19-15. That game was on Thursday morning as well. We'll talk about that one a little bit later. But in their win over USA, this USA team for 3-on-3 has not done well. Haley Vanlith is on the roster. She's from Washington. She's a prolific current college basketball player. She's on the roster. They were supposed to have Cameron Brink on the roster from Stanford, but she tore her ACL in the early part of her rookie season with the Los Angeles Sparks. So they replaced her with Ryan Howard, who was the first pick in the WNBA draft a few years ago, came out of Kentucky. Ryan Howard hasn't really adjusted to 3-on-3 style all that well. Haley Vanlith has been okay, but this team isn't looking great. And Germany took them down 17-13. Greinacher had 5 points, 6 rebounds. She shot 4 of 7 from the field in that game. Vanlith had 6 points and 3 rebounds for Team USA, but ultimately it was a victory for the Germans. Meanwhile, Canada, in this case, took down Australia, 2-1 overall in play against Australia. The men's team beat Australia. The women's team lost to Australia on Thursday morning, but their 3-on-3 team did beat Australia 22-14 in that one. Kacie Bosch, who played at Gonzaga briefly in the 2015 and 2016 season. She was a bit player, didn't get a lot of playing time, but was there for a few years, finished her collegiate career back in Canada, has been with the 3-on-3 team for the last couple of years, helped them win some medals in FIBA tournaments, and ultimately got a chance to compete with them in the Olympic Games. She's not one of the leading scorers for this team. They have a pair of sisters who do most of the damage for Team Canada, but she did have a couple of boards. She had 2 rebounds in about 6 minutes of action in Canada's win over Australia. And then on Thursday morning, we got the two Zags competing against each other. Germany won that one over Canada. So Sunny Greinacher's team is now 2-0. 19-15 was the final score here. Kacie Bosch had 1 point and 3 rebounds for Team Canada. Meanwhile, Greinacher had 8 points to lead all scorers in the contest. She had 3 rebounds. She was 3 of 4 from the field. She had 2. Reading the box score always throws me off because she would, I think, 2 of 2 on 1-pointers and then like 1 of 3 from 2-pointers. And I was looking at it, I was like, that's right. It's 1s and 2s if you're playing 3-on-3 basketball as opposed to being 2s and 3s, of course, for the 5-on-5 basketball. So that took me a second to adjust to. Obviously, the scores are much different as well. But 19-15 final score here. Greinacher had 8 points. She is leading this German team to what is now a 2-0 record in pool play for the 3-on-3. There's a very real chance this German team wins a gold medal, and that Sunny Greinacher, a former Gonzaga women's basketball player, is the leading scorer or the catalyst for a gold medal team in basketball. And that's a story that's not getting a ton of traction. Obviously, I didn't mention Greinacher and Bosch on this show as being Olympians until right around the start of the Olympics, because I just missed looking at the 3-on-3 rosters. So I know it hasn't gotten as much coverage, but it's a very cool story, and certainly going to keep myself tuned into German 3-on-3 basketball as much as I possibly can to see if Sunny can help bring this team and her country a gold medal. Sticking on the women's side here quickly before we transition out to talking about the future for each of these teams. The women's basketball team for Team USA absolutely smoked Japan in their first game. 102-76 was the final score. Obviously, no Zags representing on the USA roster at this point. There are some local talent from the area. Sabrina Ionescu, who went to University of Oregon, who played for Coach Kelly Graves, who is, of course, the former Gonzaga women's basketball coach. Ionescu had 11 points and 5 assists. Kelsey Plum, who went to the University of Washington, had 11 points and 3 assists. Jewel Lloyd, who plays for the Seattle Storm, she had 2 points, 2 boards, and an assist in that big win over Japan. Well, folks, we're going to talk about what's next for Team Canada. Can Rui and Japan live to see another day? All that and more coming up in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Annie Patton, still Locked On Zags podcast, and we're still going through Olympic basketball coverage here on Locked On Zags as the calendar gets into August. As a reminder, I said it earlier, the show is going to continue to be 5 days a week as we get into the middle of August through the Olympic period. Then we'll start to see the show be down to 3 episodes a week in late August throughout the month of September. We'll be back full time in October, 5 episodes a week as we get prepared for the start of the basketball season. But we got Olympic basketball coverage. That's what we're focusing on primarily for the next couple of weeks. We'll, of course, continue to keep you up to date on recruiting updates, get some fun guests onto the show as well, all sorts of stuff. It's not just going to be Olympics, but it is an easy way to keep us up to date on what's going on with our former Zags right now. So let's talk about what's next. We talked about how the last couple of days have gone for each of the respective teams that have a former Zag, either on the coaching staff or playing for them in the various events for women's basketball, for men's basketball, for 3-on-3 basketball as well. So now I want to take a look at what the next event is for each of these teams. We start with Canada, the men's side, the team with Kelly Olynyk and Andrew Nembhard. They will take on Spain on Friday at 8:15 a.m. Pacific time. That is the game I will be having on in the background throughout my workday. Love getting a chance to watch this Canadian roster. They've been a lot of fun. I mean, not just getting a chance to see Kelly and Andrew compete once again. Obviously, that's fun, but it's been fun to watch. RJ Barrett is playing fantastic. I know he's a Duke guy, and I know we boo Duke guys, but he's been playing really good basketball lately. SGA, Jamal Murray. It's a fun team. It's a fun team, and I'm excited to see what they can do against Spain on Friday morning. Japan and Brazil will also play on Friday morning, but we're talking morning, as in 2 a.m. Pacific time. So it's not even really morning. If you want to watch Japan and Brazil, you're probably staying up late Thursday night in order to get a chance to watch that one. 2 a.m. Pacific time for Japan. We'll see how Rui can respond from what was a great game against France, but an unfortunate ending for him getting thrown out of that game and ejected for a very, very weak flagrant foul. We'll see how they can respond if they can pick up a victory here against a pretty good Brazilian team. Serbia takes on South Sudan. That game is on Saturday at noon Pacific time. We'll see how Filip Petrusev looks in that one. Again, he led the team in scoring in their most recent game against Puerto Rico. South Sudan has been very good. I think that's going to be a competitive game. Certainly, a lot's going to ride on Nikola Jokic and how the Sudanese team attempts to defend Jokic. And if they're all over him, that could lead to Petrusev having another big game and helping lead this Serbian team to another victory. And then finally on the men's side, you got Team USA versus Puerto Rico. That game is on Saturday morning, 8:15 a.m. Puerto Rico has been one of the least competitive teams up to this point, so I expect Team USA to be able to take care of business there. Always fun to watch those games just to see Mark Few on the sideline. Occasionally you'll get broadcasters. Dwayne Wade told a story about Mark Few. They continue to bring him up periodically. It's easier to bring him up when he's facing his former team when they played Serbia, and they mentioned Petrusev being a former Zag. Obviously not going to be the case in this Puerto Rico game, but should still be fun to see how that one shakes out. On the women's side, Yvonne Ejim and Team Canada play Nigeria on Sunday at 4:30 in the morning, again, Pacific time for that one. If you're on the East Coast, that one's a little bit more palatable, 7:30 a.m., 4:30, pretty darn early, but hopefully that'll be a game where we get to see Yvonne get some playing time, make her Olympic debut on the floor, and just kind of be able to have that experience and get that opportunity to play in that game. And then for Germany and Canada, there's a little bit of a gap right now before they get into the actual medal games. So I think those are going to come up on August 5th, August 6th. The matchups for those specific games are not set, or at least I could not find the specifics on those matchups there. But as we said, Germany is 2-0 right now. They beat the United States. They beat Canada. It looks like Sonny Greinacher has a real chance to take home a gold medal in the 3-on-3 basketball tournament. So that should be fun to keep an eye on there. The Canadian team hasn't done as well, but perhaps they can still find their way into a medal. And we could have a couple of Zags potentially bringing home some medals, although both of them not playing here currently in the United States. Folks, that's going to wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On Zags podcast. I want to thank all of you for making this show your first listen or your first watch of the day as we get into August here. It is very much appreciated to still have all of you checking out the show. We're going to continue Olympic coverage. We're going to continue talking recruiting. We're going to continue to talk starting lineups, NBA draft. We're going to keep you up to date on what's going on the men's side. On the women's side, we'll look at some Zag baseball updates. Alec Jacob came up for the San Diego Padres, looked excellent, striking out 3 Dodgers in a recent game. We'll get you more updates on everything going on in Gonzaga basketball and conference realignment, all sorts of fun topics. So don't go anywhere here on Locked On Zags. Thanks again for listening, folks. And until next time, as always, go Zags.